How do you make concept art for a comic? I don't know if there's a right way to go about it, but this is how I did it. First, I made a list of all the concept art I'd need to make for the pilot, and what order it was probably best for me to tackle them in. I decided to take an approach of starting as zoomed out as possible, starting with things like the island shape and general scenery, and then zooming in, working on the most important and refined details last, such as the character designs of the 4 key characters in the story. This week I worked on figuring out the location that my pilot would take place in. If you saw the video from last week, you'll know it's set on a small tropical island mostly covered in rainforest. I included this in the description I wrote of the visuals for the island, which included everything the final design needed to have. When making concept art, I find it useful to have those main goals written out so I don't lose track of the main aspects I need to keep in mind. I then gathered my references, starting with just looking up tropical islands and rainforests on Google, trying to find images from an aerial or top-down view. Side note, I use an app called PureRef to hold my references in usually. It's perfect for artwork since the canvas just changes size to accommodate for all the images you add in. You can resize it as needed, and it has a function that lets you keep it on top of all your other tabs at times, which is massively helpful. And it's free, so it's pretty good. So I spent a bit of time going through various Google image searches to give me an idea of how my island design needed to look, eventually also adding a few stylized pieces of art from Pinterest to help with the kind of pirate town vibe I was going for. It was a bit annoying having to wade through the increasing amount of AI generated images that seem to come up whenever you search for literally anything photography or artwork related. But I managed. I also found this, which isn't relevant, but I just thought it was funny. Someone just drew a new face over this original piece of art, and the original is just sitting right there in the suggested section below. I took a bit of a detour to get some other references too, like this pirate ship sketchfab model, which will be super useful as reference later on when I need to draw ships at various angles. I also took a quick look at some art styles and how they portray a lot of trees and vegetation, because I'm still pretty bad at that. This stuff didn't come in super useful for the concepts I was making now, but they'll be very helpful down the line when I start drawing the actual thing. Then I got to my first bit of artwork. I figured out a natural looking silhouette for the island, which I didn't really know what the trick was for that. I just tried to avoid straight lines and symmetry as much as possible. I used some of the island references and map drawings of actual islands as a loose guide for it as well. Once this was done, I figured out roughly how it would sort of sit in the world. So I added some compass directions and loose annotations just to give me an idea of where the main 3 landmark regions of the world are in relation to it. I don't have any kind of official map for my world currently. I might make one down the line, but at the moment I have no idea how to really go about it, because I've tried a few times but I'm never really happy with the outcome. I knew from my thumbnails last week that I'd need to position it in a certain direction to the sun, which rises in the east. And I also knew it needed to sit at the edge of the archipelago, because in this world, the archipelago is surrounded by what I'm currently calling the Dark Sea, which is basically filled with eldritch horrors and is pretty much a zone you can't survive in. The island, which I'm calling Herald's Grave, also sits on the border of the 2 factions of the archipelago, so I needed to make sure I knew where those factions sat in relation to it. After I figured this out, I got to designing how Herald's Grave would actually look. I did this by using the distort function of the transform tool on Photoshop to change the perspective of the silhouette, which I had drawn a rough plan over of some of the elevation and mountainous regions. I then painted over the silhouette, just kind of a general island shape, I guess, I don't know. When it came to painting over the silhouette, it took me a few tries, but I eventually ended up with something I was happy with. I simplified the shadows much more instead of getting so lost in trying to portray so much detail. It's easy for that to happen when you're painting something you're unfamiliar with, especially when you're working from a reference. References can easily become more of a hindrance than a help if you don't take the time to actually look at them and take the information you need from them. I think that's why a lot of professional artists' studies look so different from the references they're studying. It's just a way of simplifying things down into the information that you need. I think it's pretty obvious at this point that I don't do a whole lot of map-based planning or environment art, so I definitely think this is an area I can improve on. For now though, this is where I ended up. I think I messed up a bit on proportions and need to make the land feel a little bit bigger. Maybe by making the town and docks smaller, but this is still useful to have. I also recreated the painting style I used so I wouldn't forget it, and just to also make sure that I could recreate it. And then I moved on to planning the actual part of this island that the scene that I'm going to be drawing takes place in. So before I started, I did a bit more research into tropical jungles and rainforests. I wanted to try and gather more references before I drew out this area because I wasn't really sure how it was going to look. This particular area is at the edge of the jungle, so I wanted to get an idea of how a jungle edge is supposed to look. But I couldn't actually find much on a Google search, so I watched a few YouTube videos instead before getting distracted and watching this video of a travel vlogger going through the Amazon rainforest. She does that typical travel vlogger thing of making it look so fun and like picturesque and all like, you know, my life is a movie. I think she even says that at one point.
So green and untouched, it looks like we're in a movie right now, which is amazing.
I was like, oh damn, like this actually looks pretty cool, like I wish this was me. And then I saw this.
I'm literally fishing for a tarantula.
You know what? On second thought, I'm actually fine. I'm good. I'm good where I am.
That was freaking insane.
Anyway, after watching that video, I got back to work. I made another floor plan of the area and used the same technique as before to have a 3D representation. I don't do a whole lot of environment work, as I'm sure you can probably tell, so this is new territory for me. I also hate or can't draw trees very well, so I don't know why I decided to make an entire comic set in and around jungles. I just hate myself, I guess. It will be a good learning experience though. Some areas are lacking, like the detail in the plants and the watchtower and ruins, but I honestly just needed an idea of like scale and stuff, so this worked fine for today. I'll come back and refine those other details in the coming weeks. I was gonna try creating a floor plan in Unreal Engine because I thought it would be simple enough to just, you know, grab some free assets and make an area that I could visualize in a 3D space. But I've also never used Unreal Engine, so I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. After a while, I realized it was too hard and I just gave up. A few days later, I did come back and take a look at what I'd made and realized the scale was off on a lot of stuff. I didn't edit the second image I drew, but I did go back to the island painting I made, and I just kind of repainted a couple of areas so the island felt a bit more realistic and to scale. That was it for this week. Next week, I have plans to go more in depth with the kinds of plants, trees, and animals that the island will have, so if you're interested in seeing that, subscribe. For now, though, thanks for watching, and goodbye.